Hello everybody, Mannix here. Wanted to make another little addition to How It Locks, a video series where I talk about different knife locking mechanisms. I do a brief overview of how they function, what they're all about. This is going to be on one of the most common locking mechanisms in the world, the liner lock. Most cheaper knives use this, and I would say the second most common, if not maybe the most common, is probably the lockback, but I'm going to gear more towards the liner. That's probably the most commonly used locking mechanism. Now, in case you do not understand how it works, basically it's kind of an ingenious design, very old. It utilizes the liner, because this knife happens to have the G10 handle scales, and then you have two steel liners in here, and it utilizes one of the liners, regardless of whether it has one or two, and it has a little cutout in there. And what they do is they just bend, from the factory, they bend that cutout of the liner out somewhere around here, much further than this. But what happens is, once you put the knife together, if you look closely, you can see that the tang that is below the handle, that's what you cannot really see below the handle, the part of the blade, the tang is kind of on a slant, it's on a diagonal, as you can see right there. And it matches up with the diagonal that the liner happens to be on as well. The liner itself is not, cut out to be a diagonal, but it slants over on a diagonal and it fits into place into the tang of the blade right there, and that's what locks into place. And so what prevents the knife, or the blade rather, from over traveling is the stop pin up here. So there's also an addition of a stop pin, so it's pinched perfectly in time for when the blade can no longer travel any further, just in time for the tang to make room for that liner to move where it wants to be. Obviously there's more tension, it's constantly wanting to move this way, and that's what pinches it in place. And if you put a little bit of your own force on there to counteract that, that's what frees it. Very ingenious, very simple, very effective design. It's stronger than it looks. A lot of people say liner locks are weak or weird or whatever. I mean, if you're like batoning with the knife, like whacking a log on the back of it or something, trying to chop a tree down with your liner lock, yeah, it's probably not going to be the strongest for you, but I don't see why you would be doing that. They're very quick, they're very easy, they're one-handed operation, very simple, very cheap to make. It's literally just taking a cutout of the liner and bending it, and then like timing it up with the tang. That's it. It's very easy to do for manufacturers, very affordable. That's why it's so commonly used, extremely common locking mechanism. Downsides, well, they're not exactly ambidextrous. Almost every single one I've ever seen has been slanting towards the right, not the left. So you push, if you're right-handed, you push with your thumb and then push the blade down, the spine of the blade anyway, with your index finger. If you were left-handed and you had it in your left hand, you have to pull back with your thumb and then pull it down. It's slightly less, you can get used to it, but one issue, it's technically not an ambidextrous locking mechanism. Not that that's a huge deal, but still. Now, another thing that's cool about liner locks is that they are self-adjusting, like most locks, but basically, as this wears, every time you open and open and open and open the knife, every time you hear that click, technically speaking, there is a technical amount of material of this liner, which happens to be made of stainless steel, that gets grinded away. And there's a technical amount of the blade, probably a lot less on the blade, because they heat treat the blades probably way, way more than their liners down here. But either way, technically both parts of the material start to wear. And what happens, this is kind of like a life bar, okay? See, the more this gets used, the more and more and more the liner travels, because there's less of it, so it has more room to move, and then it stops when it hits the next part of the diagonal of the tang of the blade right there, as you can see. So what happens when you just keep doing it? Well, they call that 100%. When the liner hits the very end of the blade right there, they call that 100%, and the more you use it, the more it grinds. It has nowhere else to go, so what eventually is going to happen is it's going to just grind away, and then you will get blade play, because your blade now has room to move. It's not perfectly pinched between the liner and the stop pin right there, because it gets grinded away at a certain point, to the point where there's nowhere else for it to go. So that's one downside to liner locks, but technically speaking, I think that's the exact same case with every locking mechanism, because the more you use it, the more parts are going to grind away. Eventually, there's going to be wear. It takes an incredibly long time. I have yet to actually have a liner locking knife that actually did that eventually made it all the way up to that point. It takes a long, long time for it to do that. I can't give you any estimation. Of course, higher quality knife, it's going to take much, much longer to do that, but that's something cool about it. It's a self-adjusting locking mechanism. So one common issue with liner locks is if they're not successfully manufactured out of the factory, what happens is usually the liner lock is not bent outward enough. I'm talking if you took it apart. So if, let's say like it only bent out to this point, so if that was the case, you would get blade play because it's not making complete contact. So what you can do is you can just take it apart and then bend it out a little more yourself. I mean, do this at your own risk. It's be careful. But if you do choose to do that, if it's having blade play issues, you can try just bending it out forward, then putting it back together, and then that way you'll have a tighter lockup. If you do it too much, the knife will be too hard to open up, but it will lock better. You do have to find a happy medium. So that's one way you can fix a liner if out of the box you have blade play. That's one way you can do it. If it's not working, there's something wrong somewhere else that I don't know how to explain. But basically that's the liner lock. Very simple, very ingenious, cheap locking mechanism that works very well. It's not one of the stronger locking mechanisms, but then again you have to ask yourself, how strong does your folding knife need to be? What are you doing with it? 99% of the time the locking mechanism doesn't really matter based on what you're doing with your folding knife. Anyway guys, that is the next addition to How It Locks. That is the liner lock. If you're interested in seeing knife reviews, more How It Locks videos, flashlight reviews, lighter reviews, and incoherent rambles about the EDC and gear, whatever you want to call it stuff, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell that YouTube put in for some reason, so to make sure you don't lose any notifications if you want to see more of these videos. I'm trying to make weekly videos now, at least once a week, at least each Wednesday, but I could make 2 or 3 videos a week depending on my mood, I don't know, but I do promise weekly videos from this channel from now on. In the past, my uploads have been a little bit consistent, but things are speeding up now, and I'm starting to be able to pump out videos a lot quicker now. So anyway, that's it. Thank you for watching.